This is FE Peer Review. The date is 10th of March 2021. The video under review is by Exploring the Plane, and there is a link in the description. This is a long-distance observation, but there's more to it than that. To be clear, the screenshots are not in chronological order, and I don't want to seem to misrepresent the video, so I've left the timestamps in. I've reordered the imagery because I have a point to make beyond the observation itself, and the reordering was necessary for that. We are looking at a long-distance observation by Exploring the Plane. We have a observation point, and he gives the height. It's in parbold. We have a landmark that he has shown us here from a Google image. And this is his setup next to that gate. We can see where he's focusing with the camera and what he's seeing through the camera, which is the Isle of Man in the distance. He has entered his data, the elevation of his observation point, the target distance 84 miles, and the target hidden height. He is using the Earth curve calculator that does not include refraction. So this is purely geometry based on a sphere. He has put this comment in towards the end of the video, knowing that he is going to be receiving critiques based on not using atmospheric refraction. He has put this comment: don't be taken in by the endless, complex, unproven excuses of light refraction. All right, so not endless, conceptually simple, though complex to measure and predict due to nature's variability. But just because something is complicated and requires a lot of math doesn't mean we can ignore it. Last and most important is the word unproven. This gets into the subject of proof versus evidence and certainty, 100% certainty versus probabilities. In the beginning of the video, he starts with this sort of a disclaimer: do not watch this. If you continue, then please remember that any comments made which do not support flat Earth will be disallowed. So he has said that he will not support any discussion or critical discussion of his views if they do not support the flat Earth. He says this at the outset, and then at the end of the video he says this about refraction, and in the course of the video he makes his observation as if atmospheric refraction can be ignored. Let's look at the picture here. He knows he will be challenged on the refraction issue and is not willing to support his position in the face of that challenge. Why might that be? Is it because we know that we can believe our eyes? Because light traveling in straight lines through a changing atmosphere is a fact? If that's the case, then we must accept the reality of flying boats. After all, there can be no other explanation. Or on the other hand, given that none of us have ever been on one of these flying boats, and if you were to talk to the people on these boats after the fact, they would attest that the boat never left the water, perhaps these boats aren't actually flying. Perhaps, just maybe, the endless and complex phenomenon of flying boats actually has an explanation, and that the preponderance of the evidence has led to detailed calculations that lead to very predictable and reproducible results. Maybe in its simplest form, the explanation looks something like this from the Guardian article. Here's the Guardian article, and this is the image explaining conceptually what's going on. Maybe in its much more detailed form, it looks something like this. Complex? Yes, and this is just the beginning. But some things are complicated. That's life. The worst of it is that even this is something of an approximation. I say approximation because natural sciences deal with all the variability that is to be found in nature. And so to try to capture all that variability is a process of approximating and then constantly refining based on reviewing the data, reviewing the approximation, checking, finding the degree of error, improving the approximation, reducing the degree of error, so forth. This equation comes from an article here, Astronomical article, Astronomical Refraction, Thomas and Joseph. You can, I'll put the link to the article in the description. There's the equation I had on the screen. There's lots more here. There's the diagram based on it. There's lots more. Because we're dealing with the atmosphere, and the atmosphere's got variations in temperature, variations in humidity, all kinds of things going on that have to be accounted for. So yeah, it's complicated. It's hard. You got to be really smart, and you got to spend a lifetime learning this stuff in order to figure it out. Wouldn't it be nice if life was easy and simple? It isn't. Exploring the plane is asking for proof. He says unproven excuses of light refraction. He's asking for proof, not evidence, not the preponderance of the evidence, not hundreds of years of testing that have shown our estimations to be pretty darn good. He wants proof, 100% absolute proof, and science doesn't do that. This is what we're getting at here. This is my main point. Science doesn't do 100% certainty. If you want 100% certainty, you've got to look to your religious books and faith, because you're not going to find it in science. Science deals in evidence and probabilities. So given that the world of science has not satisfied exploring the plane's need for absolute 100% proof, he chooses then to, on that basis, completely ignore the possibility of refraction, doing his observation, ignoring it, implicitly there, he's implying that it has been disproven by ignoring it in his observation and claiming to have an observation that's got some validity. He is implying that refraction has been disproven, does not need to be considered. But he has not provided proof for that claim. It's an implicit claim. He doesn't come out and say it, but he bases his actions on it, and he doesn't provide 100% proof. And you know what? The world of science wouldn't ask him for 100% proof, but he's going to have to show how all the hundreds of years of science that leads up to what we know about refraction got it wrong. He has to show how we got it wrong and how he has got a solution that provides a more accurate picture of what's there. Atmospheric refraction, the science around it, is used by organizations like the military. They use refraction in aiming ballistic missiles. Targeting has to be adjusted based on atmospheric conditions, and atmospheric refraction is taken into account in doing this targeting. I have a couple of papers that were written by the U.S. military on how refraction is incorporated into targeting. Atmospheric refraction is used in other industries as well. It's used in the telecommunications industry because it affects the way signals transfer from one tower to another. It's used in astronomy a lot. In fact, I'm going to get an image here that shows some interesting astronomical observations that demonstrate refraction. These next two images are from the Wikipedia page on atmospheric refraction. This image, we're seeing the crescent moon as it's descending towards the horizon, and on the left we can see well above the horizon, where there's less refractive influence from the atmosphere, we see the crescent fairly consistently shaped. I mean, already we can see that the moon is actually a slight oval rather than round, but the crescent itself is not too deformed. And then going from top to bottom on the right, we see as that moon reaches the horizon that it's passing through bands of different densities of atmosphere, and the refraction, I better be careful how I say this. The moon's not passing through the atmosphere. The light coming off the moon to our eyes is passing through different bands of the atmosphere. And as that light passes through those bands, we see these various distortions happening. And here's the sun near the horizon, doing something similar. You can see the extreme distortions to the shape of the image of the sun. Same phenomenon as it approaches the horizon. This becomes more and more forceful effect. This is thoroughly well understood. You see this in star trails if you do images, if you do, what do they call them, time-lapse images of stars as they approach the horizon. You will see that whereas they had been traveling on a straight path, the refraction in the atmosphere distorts the shape of the path. So the point is, this stuff has been around for a long time. A lot of people have used it. It's been used successfully. It has resulted in predictable effects. We've been able to incorporate it into the work we've done in astronomy, in ballistic missile targeting, in telecommunications, in navigation. And to demand 100% proof, or to in consequence simply ignore, you're holding the rest of the world up to one burden of proof and yourself to another. You have not, exploring the plane, I'm addressing this to you now, you have not disproven atmospheric refraction. Do that. Show it. Show that it's disproven. By all means, disprove it. Change the world of science. And then go do your observation from Parbold looking at the Isle of Man. And you'll have a basis for your claims of seeing too far. But you're putting the cart before the horse here. You can't just ignore refraction because you don't like it. It gets in the way of your big idea. Well, of course you can do that. That's what you're doing. But you're not going to get anywhere with it. You're going to sit in your little club with your little friends, making sure that nobody shows up and leaves a comment that challenges you in any way, because you know darn well you cannot answer that challenge. You don't have not the 100% proof. You don't even have the barest bones of evidence, the beginnings of evidence to show that there's a problem with the current scientific understanding. You show that there's a problem with that, and you are in line for a Nobel Prize. Until then, you're going to be sitting in your room there at your computer with your buddies all patting you on the back and saying, yeah, the earth is flat. What's the point? Why do that? Why is it so important to you to live in your delusion rather than accept that there is uncertainty in the world? There is uncertainty, but we have managed to go really far in the face of that uncertainty. That's how we progress. The reason why science doesn't deal in proof and 100% certainty is because we're always learning new things, and every time we learn something new, there's the possibility that it's going to require us to question something we thought we understood in the past. And in the consequence, we now live in a world where we can travel in hours to every continent, whereas it used to take months to cross North America in a covered wagon. Now you can get from North America to Asia in a non-stop flight. We have other things we've got that thanks to science. We've got a food supply that's cheap and highly dependable. Famine doesn't really exist anymore except when it's imposed through some sort of political pressure. I mean, basically, we've put famine behind us. We've managed to conquer quite a few diseases. Smallpox, horrifying disease that killed the rich and the poor alike. The children of kings died of smallpox. And it's been eradicated. And we got to this point step by step, questioning and allowing new evidence to change our views, allowing ourselves to be challenged. You can't face a challenge. You're just gonna, I don't know. It's like death, you know? It's like when you stop growing, you start dying. Why do you want to live that way? I think I've said enough here.